All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and start my share here. I've got some slides. Let me get that up here.
Hey, y'all, while Scott's getting that up, I just want to say thank you to Scott too from CU Boulder. Um, Dr. Holman, thank you so much for being here with us. I really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, again, I always offer this to everyone, but if you want to connect on LinkedIn or something like that, if you need more support, if you need me to help out, I'm always looking at these documents and stuff. So please continue to reach out. Scott has given this workshop for me several times now in person, so this is a good go on Zoom. So I just want to say from CU Boulder and from me, thank you, Scott, too. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's fun to talk about, get to geek out about your own little world for a while, you know. Yeah. So who am I? Who's this Scott Holman character? So I have a PhD in English and the teaching of English, but I've worked at CU Boulder for the last 11 years. I teach upper division and lower division writing classes for our program for writing and rhetoric. But I've worked in our writing center and our graduate writing services for 11 years. You might not have heard of a graduate writing center. It's we call it the GWS program. Once again, that's Graduate Writing Services. And really, that program is all about helping PhD students finish their dissertations. We work with master's level students as well, but primarily we're working with PhD students, and our end goal is to help you get to your defense, to defend, and to just to be done with this dissertation. And like I said, I've been there for 11 years now, and I now coordinate that program at CU Boulder. So, I'm gonna talk to you about finishing your dissertation, and these will be like very pragmatic strategies for completing your dissertation. These are strategies that I use to complete my own dissertation, as well as others I've seen work for my PhD students in the GWS program, and it's just kind of like this combined experience that I hope to share with you. Um, so, yeah, um, first of all, I would like to begin by talking about the formula that really helped me get through my dissertation. And I massage this theory, but I really like to give props to our graduate advisor at Idaho State University in our English department. Her name was Dr. Jessica Winston, and she's a Senecan scholar. And I would have these little meetings with her in her office, and she'd have these little nuggets of truth about how to finish your dissertation. And that's where I largely leaned into this formula, I guess you would say. But I also, had to enact that formula. So yeah, I used this formula over the course of a single summer. I was going through my PhD program. I only had 4 years of funding. In that last year, I had a fellowship and I had a massive mountain bike wreck. And I broke 8 bones at once. I couldn't even get my hands up to a keyboard. So that put me in this position where I had to go out on the job market. I was an adjunct and I was trying to finish a dissertation, but I had this one beautiful moment where I was able to really work on my dissertation. And that was when I had finished work as an adjunct at Colorado State University, and I knew I was going to start in the fall at CU Boulder. So I just really buckled down that summer, and I wrote 3 chapters, something like 120 pages total that summer. So yeah, that's where this formula came into effect, and here is the formula itself. First of all, you've really got to figure out when you write best, when you're most on point as a writer. For me, this is between 10 and 2 p.m. I mean, that was like after the coffee kicked in and I was able to just write. So that 4 hours for me was for dissertation writing and dissertation writing only. And I just really tried to get away from distractions, and that was like social media, anything. I found that working in my own house was a distraction. So what I would do is I would throw a ham sandwich in my book bag, and I would head off to the library. And it was summertime, so go to the basement there, and I would work on my dissertation. So, you, I will say with this, finding these hours, I know it's a huge privilege. To be able to say, oh, these are the hours I work best, right? Um, but if you can't work during your best hours, you need to do the next best thing, and that's be consistent, right? And I say that because I've had PhD students in the GWS program that have newborn babies, and that baby wakes up at 6 a.m., right? And they're getting up at 4 a.m. and writing for 2 hours, but they're writing consistently, right? So yeah, being consistent is very important. Um, um, I found that in finishing, um, or regarding the consistency, let's get back to the consistency. So, I wrote 5 days per week that summer. That I wrote 120 pages. But I did give myself weekends off to just kind of recharge. And most days I stopped working by 2 p.m. That's when my brain really just started to fade. Sometimes I would do a little bit of editing. But generally, I did something else, right? And for me, I like to hike, I like to bike. It was just whatever it took to clear my head. I found it was good to take a break on those afternoons and on the weekends. And honestly, I think I was more productive that way because when I came back to my writing, I was more refreshed, recharged, and really ready to start writing again. I don't think you'd want to go more than 2 days when you're really the more you every composition theorist will tell you, right? The more you engage with writing, the better you become. And so you need to stay in touch with it. I think 2 days off was fine by me, and I was able to jump right back into that writing. So during that period of high productivity, began my day by reading and editing what I had wrote the day before. That was my first step, and really that served as a reconnect for me. I was reconnecting back to my work, and it helped me to push forward with whatever ideas I'd been working on the previous day. It just really kind of kept the ball rolling. And it's funny, when I first started the dissertation writing process, and maybe you guys have experienced this as well, you thought you were just going to be this prolific writer and you were going to put out, 5, maybe 10 pages a day. I thought I could maybe write 5 pages a day. But really, I was putting out about 2 pages a day, at most. Yeah, two was where I was getting to. But once again, consistency paid off here, right? 2 pages a day, 5 days a week, 10 pages a week, 40 pages a month. It just stacks. And so just seek for consistency if nothing else. Seek to just constantly be engaging with that writing. Um, in general, I found with my PhD students, you got to take care of yourself too, right? Ultimately, you've got to eat regularly, exercise often, and everybody always says sleep, sleep, sleep. That was a hard one for me, right? But sleep as much as you can, right? Try to have good sleep hygiene and find healthy ways to relax, right? Uh, don't go from the dissertation writing to the beer, go to the bike and then the beer, right? Just try to stay healthy and take care of yourself because your body is needed to do this writing, right? So you got to keep it healthy. Um, next I'd like to talk about not getting stuck when you're doing your dissertation writing. Um, once you've developed a clear thesis for your dissertation, and when I'm saying dissertation, I know there's many forms of dissertation, right? Dissertations. There's the traditional style, which is like 200, 250 pages, several chapters that you bookend with an intro and a conclusion. And I know there's this more. I'm seeing this at Research One institutions at least. The three publishable papers model that you still might book in with an intro and a conclusion. So really, when I talk about introductions, I'm talking about introductions to your dissertation. I'm talking about introductions to your chapters. I'm talking about introductions to maybe these publishable papers. But anyways, once you've developed a paper, a thesis for these things, um, it's really okay to move around a bit if you need to, if you feel like you need to, just to avoid getting stuck, right? You shouldn't make a habit of avoiding difficult tasks because that's not going to finish your dissertation either. But moving on to sections of your dissertation that you find easier to write can be a better use of your time, and it's damn sure better than not writing anything at all, right? Um, so one of the main places where I see dissertation writers get bogged down is with their introductions, right? So at the beginning of every chapter, or like I said, even your dissertation or paper, I see students getting bogged down. With these introductions. And really, guys, it's okay to not know everything you want to say in that introduction. In fact, you may want to dive into the body of your paper, right? Maybe the results into the discussion, and then come back to the introduction. Um, but it's important in doing this to know who you are as a writer, right? Maybe you need the roadmap that an introduction has, and I'll have some strategies later on how to maybe get started writing an introduction. But all this is to say, I know a lot of writers who really got bogged down trying to articulate everything they had to say in an introduction, and sometimes it's better to move on from the introduction and then come back to it when you're finished. Of course, you always got to do what your dissertation advisor asks for first, right? Um, so next thing I want to talk to you about is just writing to rewrite. You should always write to rewrite. First and foremost, it's important to capture your ideas. And sometimes those ideas come pretty spontaneously. And really, what I'm getting at here is feel fe feel free to write spontaneously. I wrote my dissertation on a guy named Jack Kerouac, and Jack Kerouac had a theory of spontaneous prose where he said first thought was best thought, right? Um, so in writing in this spontaneous mode, you don't worry about whether a sentence sounds awkward or if you're using the perfect words, right? The perfect diction to articulate your meaning. This is a draft, right? And your first draft isn't your final draft, and you can always rewrite. So once again, write to rewrite those awkward sentences that you'll eventually go back and fix. Yeah, drafting is a part of the writing process, so don't let concision prevent you from making progress. Which leads me to the old adage, and I know this is cliche, you've all heard it, but let's dive a little deeper into it, right? And that is, it doesn't have to be perfect; it just has to be finished, the dissertation. But this is true, right? And this is why it gets repeated. So take some pressure off yourself. You're not going to get an A on your dissertation, right? Nobody's, out there to give you an A on it. You may refine the work that your dissertation later, right? Maybe even after you've defended your dissertation and you have a job, right? Some of that work can become a conference paper, a journal article, or a published book. But really, it's just helpful to think of your dissertation as just a graduation requirement. This is just what I do to get my PhD, right? So do the research, make the contribution, finish the project, and move on, right? You got a life to live here. So that leads me to the next step, which is really you got to believe in yourself when you're a dissertation writer. So one of the biggest problems I see with our graduate writing service clients, our GWS clients, is just really the struggle to find an authoritative voice, right? Um, but you've come to that moment in your academic career, which has been really long if you're dissertation writing, right? Where you're finally writing that dissertation. So look back on that academic career. You've come a long way, baby, right? Um, Act like it, believe it, know it. You are an authority, right? Ultimately, you've got to put your ideas out there and see what others think. To accomplish this, it may be helpful to think of your dissertation more than anything as an invitation to a conversation that will lead to your dissertation defense. And at that defense, you're going to be the ultimate authority on this subject. And I know a lot of people dread their defenses, but once again, it's your opportunity to geek out about this thing that you've been highly invested in for years and years, right? Um, and it's a pretty good feeling, right? I have to say, like through my master's defense and through my dissertation defense, I walked away from those things feeling really good. Like, it's just really this fun opportunity to talk about it. So once again, framing your a dissertation more as an invitation to a conversation can help you to alleviate some of that stress, but it helps you to, believe in yourself too, because you know you're an authority when the time comes. Um, okay, so now I'd like to get back to some more common sense strategies for finishing your dissertation. Um, so um, s- uh, think of ways to work out your ideas other than just sitting in front of a screen. Some of the best ideas for my own dissertation came while I was taking that walk or riding that bike, right? Um, what I'm getting at is that stepping away from the screen and exercising seemed to help me to make the connections in my own head as a writer, right? So yeah, I if it works for you, getting out there, taking a long walk, I would advise this. Take your smartphone with you. And when those ideas come to you or those connections come, put them in your notes, uh, however you want to do that. Because believe me, when you finally get back home, you'll forget what you thought of out there on the trail, right? Um, so, also, another means for stepping away from the screen and really thinking about your dissertation ideas might be sketching, right? And by sketching, I mean actually get out a sketchbook, get a giant sketchbook, use boxes, use arrows, use scribbles, whatever, right? It's more tactile that way, right? And you can maybe you're a visual learner and you can make a flow chart of ideas, right? But getting your ideas out in this different manner than just sitting there and trying to type might be more effective to you. And also, writing scholars have said the writing that comes from using a pen and paper can sometimes trigger your mind in ways that a keyboard can't. So if you have a serious dry spell in your writing, just maybe consider getting out a legal pad and start writing, right? Just even that tactile difference can help you. But yeah, I think we're so bound to our screens in this day and age that really some of our more prescient ideas could come from just getting away from the screen for a while. Just alternatives to being in front of your laptop all the time. Um, next, learn to read like a dissertation writer. I know when I was writing my dissertation, I had a somebody on my committee tell me, Scott, you gotta stop reading and you gotta start writing, right? Um, what I'm getting out here is that dissertation writing requires a huge amount of reading, but becoming an effective reader means you can't read all the material pertaining to your dissertation word for word, right? Therefore, thank goodness that academic writing is so formulaic, right? So recognize the formula, right? For journal articles, read abstracts, introductions, conclusions, right? Skim paragraphs for topic sentences. For books, examine the table of contents, use the subject index in the back. Skim uh, um, skim the book in individual chapters that pertain to what you have to say. Don't sit in an article and feel bogged down and like you're not gleaning information, right? Every introduction to a academic article tells you the results, right? If you want to read at the chapter level, every topic sentence is an induction, right? Usually the last sentence tells you what the takeaway is. So you just got to learn to read in these ways, and you can glean information so fast, right? It's really amazing how much information you can garner that way. So yeah, read like a dissertation writer. I'll also say like I tried to have all this research prepared for when I was going to write my dissertation, but you do so much of that research on the fly sometimes, and man, Google Scholar is an awesome tool, right? Google the idea that you need evidence for, and damn if it doesn't pop up a lot of the time, right? So, just another way to keep you moving forward. Next, let's talk about setting deadlines for yourself, right? Um, one of my biggest frustrations with my dissertation advisor was that she was the head of our department, right? So she was fairly hands off. And during the writing of my dissertation, she became the dean of our college. Right. So like it even further removed her. So the feedback I was getting, it wasn't coming. And working at CU, I work with working in a Research One institution. I see this with my grad students. Their advisors are under such tremendous pressure to publish themselves. They don't really have a lot of time for feedback, right? They might finish a chapter and ask their dissertation advisor, "So when do you want to meet again?" And the advisor will say, "Well, when you finish the next chapter." We all know we can use help in between. So you really gotta make deadlines for yourself, right? Ultimately, deadlines produce results, and results lead to completed dissertations. It's as simple as that, right? But the main things to remember when setting your deadlines is you got to set realistic deadlines and you got to stick to them. As far as like the realistic deadlines, saying to yourself that you're gonna write, uh, you know, 15 pages a day, that's just really probably not gonna happen. Um, but if you do stick to your deadlines, you'll produce much more work than you ever thought possible, right? Just by sticking to them. So set real deadlines. Set those for yourself. Um, maybe talk to your fellow graduate students that are in the same dissertation writing mode and talk about what's working for them in terms of deadlines. Okay. This next slide, a little unconventional, but it's Danielle Steele. Who's Danielle Steele? Well, she's a writer of romantic fiction, but she's one of the most prolific writers of our time. She's in her 80s. She's still writing books, and she's written over 180 novels, right? So this was a story that was conveyed to me by one of my professors in my PhD program. Anyways, Danielle Steele was interviewed and she was asked how she could possibly write so many novels. And she had a three-word response, and that was ass in chair, right? So with that, I would say don't be overwhelmed by your dissertation. Just keep putting your ass in the chair, right? Um, chip away at your project. You'll find that by sticking to it, what once seemed insurmountable becomes doable. If you just keep working at it, it'll be over soon enough. You know, I those three chapters that I wrote that summer, I sent off to my dissertation advisor, and she didn't get back to me with comments on those three chapters for almost a year. And when I got those comments back, I thought, this is going to take me another year. But I put my ass in the chair and I just chipped away at each of her individual comments, all those marginal comments. And then I remember the day I was down in the basement and I said to myself, I'm done. You know, and so yeah, well, I guess this kind of speaks to consistency, but the whole idea of showing up is a big part of finishing your dissertation. And I kind of alluded to this next slide here, but that's talk. Um, talk to as many people as possible about your dissertation ideas. This is a singular moment in your life, hopefully, right? So allow yourself to be that annoying person who's always talking about your dissertation. Talking about your ideas will help you to refine and stimulate your thinking on them. Talking to other people can lead to finding out about other sources that can help you with your writing. And as you talk to others, it may lead them to asking you about parts of your argument that are unclear or seem unsubstantiated, even gaps that you might not even have even seen, right? We can get so into the woods, right? All we're seeing is trees, right? And it's so nice to talk to somebody who might not know anything about your field, right? And they could say to you, well, you go from square one to square three, but how did you get there, right? And yeah, that's where talking, just talking to anybody about what you're doing, um, can be super beneficial. Okay. Um, Next, you got to find your form, right? This for me was something that really helped me to progress through my dissertation. So, whether your dissertation consists of chapters or as a set of publishable articles, each will have a form that repeats itself. Okay, so and this gets back to that idea of, all academic writing is very formulaic. So think of the basic headers you'll repeat, add those to your paper first, right? It can be like plug and play, right? It might also be benefit if you're looking to try to publish your work before you graduate. It's very beneficial to look at the journal where you might publish your paper. Um, every journal has a house style, right? Um, Journals are not democracies. They're run by dictators, and that dictator is the editor of that journal. And that's what they want to see in their journal, every quarter, monthly, maybe. So copy that style to the best of your ability. I had a class in my PhD work where we studied house style, and then we wrote an article, and my article got published fairly quickly, but I was just mimicking what they had, and that came down to headers, length of introductions, the headers, titles, right? The specific titles, length, right? I got a PhD in English, so over I think 2 or 3 pages, we had to write down every simple sentence that we saw, every compound sentence we saw, every complex sentence we saw, and every complex compound complex sentence. But even that helped us to understand the language we should be using in that journal. So, anyways, that can be beneficial to you in finding your form. But look at a minimum, look at the last dissertation that was passed in your department. If you could get the last dissertation that your advisor approved, that would be the most beneficial. But yeah, if it's gone through your department and it's been passed, look at that dissertation and discover their form, and that's going to help you move along a lot more quickly. A very basic form that is repeated is the introduction. I told you I'd be getting back to that. So for every chapter paper or even the dissertation itself, you'll have an introduction, and all those introductions follow a form. And something that I have come across in the graduate writing services is this metaphor of Baby Werewolf Silver Bullet. And I think it's super beneficial in terms of helping you to start your paper if you're feeling stuck. Um, once again, this is all about your introduction. So you can even think about writing this in 3 paragraphs. When you think about a publishable length article, um, you know, 2 to 3 pages is plenty for an introduction. So, anyways, the first part of that introduction, which can be the baby, um, is well, the baby is your research baby, right? It's the thing you care about. But more importantly, what you should be articulating here is why other people should be caring about it too. So in this section of your intro, you're underscoring why it's important, why others should care about it. But then what happens? Your research baby is threatened by what? The werewolf, right? So the werewolf is that thing that threatens your research baby. It's the thing we don't know, and that's the research gap, right? So what do this is this thing that I'm very wed to that I very much believe in, right? My research baby. But here's the thing we don't know about this thing I care about, right? That is the werewolf, right? It's threatening your research baby. And if you guys know werewolf lore, the only way to kill a werewolf is with the silver bullet, right? Um, Here with the bullet, you're explicitly stating how you'll fill that gap. And You can also think of it as a projected organization for your paper, telling the reader what you'll be doing. Overall, remembering this basic form can help really drive your dissertation forward. I talked about like introductions sometimes being problematic. But if you can think of it in this baby werewolf silver bullet metaphor, right? You will have a start to your dissertation, right? And it'll provide a roadmap for the rest of your dissertation. One of the PhD students that I work with, she just defended last semester. Our first GWS session, we would use this baby werewolf silver bullet model to write an abstract, right? We just like, very like workshop style, hands-on, let's walk through this. But once she had written that abstract, she was then able to like, expand that into her introduction, and it really seemed to help her move a lot more quickly through her dissertation writing. Okay. Next, remember the basics. Working in the GWS program, I see that PhD students are pretty far divorced from that moment when they took their freshman composition class or even their high school English classes, right? And they tend to forget those basic writing forms. So, um, One thing that I see over and over again is they've totally forgotten how to write a paragraph, right? Um, every paragraph has a thesis, right? Just like your paper, right? And that's your topic sentence. And so, really, as you write this dissertation, right, you can think about every paragraph you write as having 3 parts: assertion, evidence, and analysis. Your assertion is your topic sentence. Then you back up that assertion with this evidence, right? And then you state in your analysis piece how that evidence backed up not only that topic sentence, but maybe your overarching idea, right? So once again, your assertion will identify a um, topic of the paragraph, make an assertion about it, then you'll supply that as evidence for the assertion, And at the end of your paragraph comes your analysis, where you explicitly state not only how your evidence backs up your assertion, but how it bolsters the overall thesis of your chapter, paper, dissertation, etc. And this one, two, three waltz will take you through your entire dissertation. Whether that be a lit review, a results section, a discussion section, or even your conclusion, right? Assertion, evidence, analysis. I had a close friend who was writing a dissertation, and she was really struggling with how to write a lit review. And I brought up this idea of assertion, evidence, analysis. It just clicked for her. It's like, of course, yeah, that's what I need to be doing. That's how I write it. Um, so yeah, getting beyond the basics, I would say really look for scaffolding. I think we're pretty lucky at CU Boulder. There's a lot of scaffolding for us students. We have a GWS program. The graduate school does these write-ins, but as I mentioned previously, dissertations advisors can be pretty busy, so you got to look for those other resources to help you with your writing. Um, really, every university has a writing center. And at our writing center, over half of our clients are graduate students. We have a lot of graduate programs, I know, but making an appointment at your university writing center will give you a sounding board at a minimum, but it also can help you to make abstract ideas more concrete for outside readers. Um, and when you make those appointments, which you can usually book like a week out, maybe even further out, depending on what university you're at, um, you have an accountability measure built in, right? That you'll have to bring something to that session. So, our graduate writing services is biweekly, and so it's a really nice accountability measure. Our students know that every other week they'll have an appointment with their GWS consultant, and so they have this 2 weeks to come up with new writing. But even if you don't, you can use this same accountability at your writing center. Um, yeah. So maybe you too have a graduate writing services or a graduate writing center. Um, But additionally, other outside things that I've seen work is looking for writing groups. Like I mentioned, our graduate school have these write-ins, and really it's just a bunch of writing, a bunch of PhD students getting together in a huge seminar room, huge conference room, and they just all write. And then one of our representatives from the GWS program is there, and they can bounce ideas off them as they write. But I know departments sometimes have these writing groups. And when I was in my program at Idaho State University, um, we created our own, right? Nobody was creating it for us. And so we just tried to read regularly on Mondays. And for those sessions, what we did was we talked about what we had written, right? And last week I was working on this, and then I worked on this, and just having that check-in with other people. I mean, there was only like 4 or 5 of us that were showing up regularly, but it was really um, helpful. And once again, it created accountability. Another thing that I did with a friend that was working on her dissertation at an entirely different university. In Dropbox, we had an accountability folder, right? And we had to drop stuff into that accountability folder every Monday. And it just kind of forced you to like, okay, I gotta have something. Gotta have something ready for my friend to see that I'm progressing. But um, that's all I have for you guys. That's it in a nutshell. Once again, just really based on my experience in our graduate writing services and my own experience.
Thanks, Scott. Hey, I got a couple questions in the Q&A that I want to relay back to you. I might have answered them to my best ability, but actually your last point about an accountability partner, I think applies to a lot of things that I even spoke to in here. But first thing, briefly, could you Could you talk about the baby werewolf silver bullet thing again real quick, just for folks that like somebody wants to relay it to a colleague and they're like, can you give me
Okay.
a
Okay.
tight version of that possibly?
So, the baby werewolf silver bullet, it really works for any introduction, and including your abstracts, right? So, if you're writing papers, you might have an abstract, or even for a conference, right? So, the baby is your research baby, right? That's the thing you care about, um, and in that portion of the introduction, you're underscoring the significance of your project, right? Oftentimes, I'll see like a huge statistic. Today I was working with somebody who's in a lab that's making connective tissue, and their baby gave these like really impressive stats about like how many like these issues with connective tissues affect this many million Americans every year, right? Speaking of things like arthritis and so forth. So wow, this is significant. This is why I should care, right? So you're putting out there why you care about it, but more importantly, why other people should compare or should uh, care about your subject. And within that section, you should generally get all the context you need to understand where you're going with the problem, right? And the problem is the werewolf, right? That's the research gap. Um, so if you wanted to break it into three paragraphs, that second paragraph would be underscoring, just where the problem lies. More often than not, it starts with the phrase, however, right? However, this is what we don't know, right? And so then in that section or paragraph, you would delineate where the shortcomings are, or what we don't know about the subject. Next paragraph is your silver bullet, right? Um, this research aims to do blank, right? This is how we fill that research gap. You've uncovered the werewolf, the thing we don't know. So how does your paper, your dissertation, your whatever research you're working on, how does it fill that research gap, or at least attempt to?
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah,
A
no
lot of the
problem.
other questions in there so far, we'll get to the two that popped up here, but one of them relates. It's a lot of talk on time management
Hmm.
and how to get going, how to not procrastinate, how to not feel overwhelmed. There's some this session in particular, I think, brings a lot of like therapeutic type of discussion too. Like, how do
Yeah.
we, there's the self-care piece of it. Um, there's the time management. Like, any advice, thoughts on that? Like, and it relates to your last thought that I was talking about in terms of finding people to be accountability partners. But any other thoughts on like getting going again, and maybe not feel like bite-sized chunks. Like, what is that? I talked about the Pomodoro method. I talked about, in there, I talked about, that you're more important than that work is too. And that no
Yeah.
one's going to remember the person who burns out and stuff like that. But, any
You,
thoughts on that?
something that really helps me, helps my students, and that I've suggested to my graduate writing students is free writing. Um, so it's zero stakes, right? You can take out a notepad or maybe just open up a blank Word document and just start writing about whatever you want to the about your subject. And a prompt there, super simple. Something I was introduced to in working at writing centers a long time ago was start off with this phrase. What I'm trying to say is, and then just keep going with it. And once again, right, it needs to. It doesn't need to be concise. It does. Don't think of the best word. The don't um. You know that there's sources out there that are going to back you up, right? Just get the ideas out there. So, but consistently free writing every day helps you to engage with the act of writing. And I don't, a process I used to do, like I got away from it, but I know like definitely in my master's program, I would write on a legal pad. I would write my papers and then I would take that paper and then I'd sit at the computer and write it. And oftentimes that's when I brought the research in, you know? I think as a way to get going, like, you know, free writing is for you. You satisfy yourself first. Your way is the only way. And just start free writing and see what ideas come to surface. They might not all be good, but you're bound to find a nugget in there somewhere. So that's like a way to get going. I found when I was doing my coursework for my PhD, you'd write, like you'd have at least like three seminar papers that were like 20 plus pages per course, like, and so like that's usually due like first week of December, and then you'd go on winter break, and then you'd come back, and you'd have like 6 weeks of instruction before the first paper was done, and it was really hard to start to write another paper. But free writing, you're writing, it's yeah, once again, it's low stakes, and it helps to keep you in the act of writing.
Thanks, Scott. There's another one in here about, I'm not sure what Danielle means by scaffolding, but how do you go about creating scaffolding? I don't live in my university town anymore or don't have a cohort. Maybe it's where else might you go to find support maybe for this large thing, this albatross we're all dealing with at some
Yeah.
point in our career. Like,
It depends on how if you're really like far away from your university, that's too bad, right? Because I mean, I think that the scaffolding comes from other people who are going through what you're going through. Um, you know, so just trying to find those other people, that are going through it. Maybe it's Reddit, right? Maybe you get into a Reddit group on dissertation writing. But I think if you're writing your dissertation, you have some privilege to be able to work with your university. And something that really changed during the pandemic was that writing centers are no longer this physical location on campus that you have to walk into. Um, Over half of our appointments now are remote appointments, right? And so this allows for people who are doing field work even, to join us. Before the pandemic, our graduate writing services was we had a space on campus, and we you had to come and meet us in our cubicle. But then after the pandemic, we realized we were missing a huge demographic, and that was the people that are out there doing their uh, field work, I've had sessions with people in Germany, Alaska, Italy, India, um, French Polynesia. I think that you can always engage with your writing center, and writing center pedagogy is all about like helping you become a better writer, making you comfortable as a writer. So that's the kind of scaffolding I'm talking about. Um, but it's also just exploring like what resources you have. Like it's just crazy to me sometimes when I get a PhD student that's like in their fourth or fifth year that tells me, I didn't know we had a writing center. I didn't know we had a graduate writing services, we try to promote ourselves. We try to let people know we exist. So that's the type of things I'm t talking about.
thanks, Scott. I'll agree with you. A lot of our programs don't know that there's folks there for graduate writing too.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
we think about it in terms of our undergraduate classes, and we're like, oh, everybody, go to the writing center, go to the writing center, rather than because I understand that logic by some
Yeah.
folks of going, like there's a service and we send them, but whatever. But I also don't get why, there's not as much support for. Sorry, I work in a center for teaching and learning, so I'm right there too.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
So
hey, I
yeah,
wish more of y'all
here
would see me.
your dissertation is the pinnacle of your academic career up to that point, right?
Yep.
There's no classes how to do this thing that's the pinnacle of your career, right? So it
Yeah.
does feel daunting. It does feel overwhelming, and it seems like some magic trick that somebody pulled off to get their doctorate, right? So yeah, you got to look for the resources that'll help you to do that. And there's books out there, and I've tried to engage with them. It's not my learning style, but there are books on finishing your dissertation. Um, I feel like it's better for me to feed off people directly than through a book. But I know
Mhm.
those books are out there. There were several recommended to me, but and I bought them, and it was more reading to have to do, right? So I just like if I could find people to talk to, that was more beneficial for me.
Yeah. Someone put it actually a comment back to the scaffolding thing about something called Focus Mate, which matches you with a random person to co-work with at a set time. That sounds really cool. Like, Reddit groups, but
Yeah,
also maybe in your own professional organization listservs. Like so thank you for whoever put that comment in there. Appreciate that
yeah,
follow up. So it takes all of us to help each other get through this
yeah.
thing. So, um,
So, and there's generative AI out there, you know? Have you guys heard about that? There's this thing called ChatGPT. But here's the thing, my PhD students are deathly afraid of it. If they throw their novel idea into ChatGPT, right? It's no longer a novel idea, right? It's out there. It's on the web. So,
Mhm.
I would say if you're going to use that, maybe just to like think about ideas, don't make them specific to your own research, or uh, what's ways to start writing? Yeah, maybe something along those lines. But yeah, it's kind of scary.
Awesome. Any more questions for Scott? Pop them in the Q&A and we'll get to them. But if not, I really appreciate you, Scott. I thank you so much for helping and being here. And yeah, I didn't go to someone in my for my dissertation either. I came to you when I wrote my second master's there, but not for my PhD. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate these times, and I think everyone could benefit from a little more support outside of their program too, which is really
Hmm.
nice to have that other set of eyes, other thought, other person to even help you think through things because we do get stuck in our cohorts, we get stuck in our disciplines, and we don't take a step
Yeah.
back. So
And it
thank
doesn't
you.
have to be somebody that's has a PhD reading your work, right?
Right.
Just
Right.
getting any sort of feedback, like it's people reading your work, and they might not understand all the really complex parts, but they can get the narrative, right? Everybody understands narratives, so yeah, let anybody read it that wants to read it.
hmm Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, you're
Thanks
welcome.
everybody for being here.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thanks, Preston, for being our facilitator as usual. I'm gonna cut the recording here.